Welcome to Infidelity Secret. Your support is everything to us. 90% of you haven't subscribed yet, so please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so we can keep bringing you amazing content. Also, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Leave your city in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's tale. I never imagined my life would come to this. A woman in her mid-40s, standing alone in a beautiful house, feeling more invisible than ever. My husband was always gone. Business trips that stretched from days into weeks. And when he did return, his presence felt more like a formality than a reunion. We barely spoke beyond small talk. Intimacy was something we hadn't shared in years. I kept up appearances, cooked, cleaned, smiled at neighbors. But inside, I was fading. It was early spring when he told me he'd be leaving again, this time for nearly a month. I nodded, pretending to understand, as always. I didn't protest. I never did. I had accepted this life, or at least I thought I had. Just a week after he left, my stepson Aiden returned from college for spring break. He was 22nd, tall, polite. He had always kept a respectful distance. I had raised him since middle school, but now he was a man. And something about the way he looked at me had changed. It wasn't inappropriate. Not at first, but it was different. His eyes lingered longer. His compliments, once casual, now felt personal. "You look beautiful today," he said one morning, his voice warm. I laughed it off, but my heart fluttered. We started spending more time together. Late night shows, cooking, grocery runs, and every time his hand brushed mine, I felt it. One evening, we sat on the porch watching the sunset. He told me I was strong, that he admired how I held the family together. It pierced through the quiet emptiness I'd grown used to. For the first time in so long, I felt seen. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying his words, his eyes, the way I didn't pull away. I told myself it was harmless, but deep down, I knew better. It happened on a Thursday night. Rain hammered the roof. A power outage cast the house in shadows. Candlelight flickered. He brought me wine. "You don't even realize how incredible you are," he said. I looked at him, startled, but he didn't look away. "You deserve someone who sees you." His hand found mine, warm, gentle, and then our lips touched. Soft where slow, not wild, but full of everything I had buried. When it ended, I stood trembling. "I need to go to bed." He nodded. I left without another word. But I didn't sleep. The next morning, I avoided his eyes. Aiden moved through the kitchen as if nothing had happened, but his demeanor had changed. Calmer, confident, like a line had been crossed, and he wasn't sorry for it. We didn't talk about the kiss, but it hung in the air like a secret too loud to ignore. Later that day, I caught him watching me. Not carelessly, intentionally. His eyes studied me like I was a portrait he was memorizing. I hadn't felt that kind of attention in years. Not from my husband, not from anyone. It was wrong. I knew it. But I couldn't stop myself from wanting more of it. He started staying home more, less time with friends, more time with me. Movie nights, errands, long walks, conversations that dug into who I was. Who I used to be before the silence of this marriage swallowed me whole. I tried to stop it. "This can't continue," I told him one day. "I know," he said, "but I can't stop thinking about you. You don't have to keep pretending. You're allowed to feel something again." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. We crossed the line again, and again. I told myself I was still in control, but I had already fallen. When his break neared its end, a silence grew between us. He started packing. Every folded shirt felt like a goodbye that hadn't been spoken. The night before he left, he stood at my door. "I don't regret anything," he said, "but I don't want to ruin your life either." I couldn't speak. My throat tightened. When he left the next morning, I didn't say goodbye. I just watched him go, like a ghost slipping out of my life. And then the house was still again. My husband returned days later. He brought souvenirs, laughed over dinner, told stories from business meetings. He didn't notice how I avoided his gaze. He didn't see that I had changed. At first, I thought guilt would consume me, but it didn't. Instead, I felt sorrow, a deep, aching sadness, not for what I had done, but for what had been missing for so long. Aiden had seen me. In 1 week, he noticed what my husband hadn't in years. He texted me once, "Take care of yourself." I stared at the message, then deleted it. I knew we couldn't continue, but I also knew I couldn't go back. In the end, I was left with a marriage still intact on the surface, but hollow inside, living beside a man who thought everything was fine, while I carried the weight of choices I couldn't undo. And maybe that's the real punishment, not being caught, but living with the truth in silence. I learned something painful. Love without attention is just habit, and attention without commitment is just temptation. Somewhere in between, I lost a version of myself I'll never get back. Weeks passed. Life settled into a rhythm that felt both familiar and foreign. My husband came and went with his usual clockwork, never noticing how little of me remained. I poured my energy into painting again. It became my escape, canvas after canvas, abstract grief, hidden desire, and all the versions of myself I could no longer speak aloud. I was silent, but my art screamed. Then, one late afternoon, as the sky bruised with storm clouds, a knock came at the door. I opened it and froze. Aiden, older somehow, worn, but his eyes still full of the same truth that had once undone me. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said quickly. "I just needed to see you once more." I couldn't leave it like that. I stepped aside. He walked in slowly, unsure, looking around like the place had aged without him. We sat in silence for a while. No wine this time, just distance and memory. "I haven't stopped thinking about you," he said quietly. "But more than that, I haven't stopped worrying that you're still invisible." I wanted to lie, to tell him I was fine, that everything had returned to normal, but it hadn't, and I wasn't. "I'm not invisible anymore," I finally said, not because he sees me, but because I see myself now. He nodded. A soft smile formed, though pain lingered in his eyes. "I'm glad," he said, "that you found a way to be whole again, even if it wasn't with me." That night, we didn't kiss, we didn't touch, we just remembered. And then we said goodbye. For real this time. He left under a darkening sky, the rain waiting just long enough for him to walk away. I stood at the window, watching, not with regret, but with closure. Some stories aren't meant to last. They're meant to wake us up, to remind us we're alive, to show us what we've lost and what we're still capable of finding. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. The brush met canvas again, and this time I painted not pain, but peace. The seasons shifted. Spring turned to summer. I spent my mornings on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the world bloom around me while something wilted quietly within our home. I hadn't told my husband the truth, not because I feared his anger, but because I feared his indifference. But the lie was starting to rot the silence between us. One morning, as he scrolled through emails at breakfast, I looked at him. Really looked. "Do you even notice me anymore?" I asked. He blinked. "What?" "I mean it," I said. "Do you see me at all?" He set the phone down. "Clara, where is this coming from?" "From the hollow space between us that we keep pretending isn't there." He sighed. "I thought we were fine." "Exactly," I said. "You thought." That night, I didn't confess everything. Not about Aiden. Not yet. But I spoke my truth. About the loneliness, the abandonment, the ache of being unseen. He was quiet. Too quiet. Maybe ashamed. Maybe just shocked. But the next day, he canceled his trip. Stayed home, cooked dinner, asked questions. Small changes, but real. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was the first time in years I felt like I had cracked the ice between us. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of something new. Not with Aiden, not with fantasy, but with truth. Truth that finally had space to breathe in the light. Weeks passed after our first honest conversation, and for once, the silence in the house didn't feel suffocating. It felt like space, room to grow. We didn't fix everything overnight. We didn't even try to. But there was movement, awareness. My husband and I began to look at each other again, not through habit or duty, but through effort. We spoke in half steps, awkward at times, but it was something. He started coming home earlier. I started painting in the living room instead of hiding in my studio. We were learning to share space again, not just physically, but emotionally. And then, one evening, as I cleaned the brushes, he asked, "What are you painting now?" I paused. "Something real," I said. He walked over and looked at the canvas. It was raw, layered. A storm and a sunrise blended together. "It's beautiful," he said. "And painful." "Yes," I whispered. "Both." That night he kissed my forehead like he used to. No spark, no passion, just gentleness. Familiarity. A thread sewn back where it had frayed. There are things I still carry. Guilt, yes. Grief for the woman I became when no one was watching. But also strength. I learned that desire doesn't always mean direction. That loneliness can be louder in a crowded house than in solitude. And that sometimes love isn't something you feel, it's something you choose to fight for. Aiden never came back. Not in body, not in message. But his presence lingered in the quietest way, in the way I learned to listen to myself again, in the way I stopped apologizing for needing more. One afternoon, I found an old photograph in a drawer. It was of me and Aiden from years ago, before the lines blurred, before everything shifted. We were smiling in the sunlight. I studied that photo for a long time. Then I placed it in a box, taped it shut, and tucked it away. Because some stories don't need to be erased, just shelved. I returned to my easel, and this time I painted without pain. I painted peace. It was a year later when the past returned. Not in the form of a message or a visit, but in the sound of a name spoken at a coffee shop. I was waiting in line when someone behind me mentioned Aiden's name. I froze. "He's back in town," the woman said casually. "Took a job at the university." I turned slowly, heart pounding. She didn't recognize me, just a stranger chatting with her friend. But the ripple she caused, it felt like a tidal wave inside my chest. I left without ordering. Back home, I sat in the garden for hours, unsure why my hands trembled. I wasn't that woman anymore. I had moved on. I had built something quiet and sacred from the pieces I'd once scattered. And yet, part of me still wondered, would I see him again? Days passed. Then, one evening, I found an envelope on my doorstep. My name written in handwriting I hadn't seen in over a year. No return address, just a single sheet of paper inside. "I never meant to become your undoing. I only wanted you to see yourself again. Thank you for waking me up too. I hope your world is full of color now. Mine is because of you. A." There was no request, no apology, no invitation, just a goodbye, a true one. That night I showed the letter to my husband. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't crack. I told him everything, not as a weapon, but as a truth he deserved to hold. He sat quietly, absorbing every word. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling me," he said. We didn't fight, we didn't cry, we just sat together. Two people who had once drifted so far apart, now learning how to hold the truth between them without breaking. Months later, we renewed our vows. Not in front of a crowd, just the two of us, in the garden, under the sky. He promised to stay present. I promised to stay honest. And in that moment, I finally felt free. Not because the past was erased, but because I had stopped hiding from it. Because healing, I had learned, is not about forgetting. It's about choosing to live fully in the after. And I was finally ready to live.